At 03:17 on the morning of November 29, 1944, Commander Joseph Enright watched through his periscope as a warship longer than 3 football fields turned broadside 1,400 yards ahead of his submarine. 34 years old. United States Naval Academy, class of 1933. 0 confirmed sinkings. The Japanese had commissioned the largest warship ever built, and 10 days later, she was steaming through waters where Enright commanded USS Archerfish, 72,000 tons, 872 feet long. Supercarrier Shinano, designed to survive 20 torpedo hits. Enright's submarine carried 24 torpedoes total. His commanding officers had nearly lost him to desk duty 11 months earlier. The other submarine skippers at Midway called his first patrol command a textbook failure, when he had let carrier Shokaku slip past USS Dace on November 15, 1943. Enright blamed himself and requested to be relieved. He spent 6 months behind a desk, while other men hunted targets. He requested another command in September of 1944. The Navy gave him Archerfish, a Balao-class submarine that had completed 4 war patrols with minimal success. This was Enright's second chance, the kind the submarine force rarely granted. Enright had assumed command of USS Dace in July of 1943, fresh construction from Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. The submarine was commissioned on July 23rd, with Enright as her first commanding officer. This was the command every submarine officer wanted: a new boat, experienced crew, assignment to the most target-rich waters in the Pacific. Dace departed New London in September of 1943, transited the Panama Canal, and arrived at Pearl Harbor on October 3rd. Enright received his patrol orders on October 17th. Japanese home waters, southeast coast of Honshu, approaches to Nagoya. Intelligence reports indicated heavy merchant traffic in the area. Dace departed Pearl Harbor on October 20th for her first war patrol. The patrol started well. On November 7th, Enright detected a large freighter sailing unescorted through his patrol area. He maneuvered Dace into attack position and fired 4 torpedoes. 3 hit. The freighter was severely damaged but did not sink. Japanese patrol craft arrived before Enright could fire finishing shots. Dace was forced to break off and go deep to evade depth charge attack. Enright surfaced after dark and searched for the damaged freighter. He found debris and an oil slick, but no ship. Intelligence later confirmed the freighter reached port and was repaired. Damaged but not sunk. Not a kill. Not a credit toward Enright's combat record. Then came November 15th. Ultra Intelligence, the code-breaking operation that gave American forces advance warning of Japanese ship movements, transmitted a message to all submarines operating near Honshu. Aircraft carrier Shokaku departing Yokosuka, course south, speed 18 knots, destination unknown. Shokaku was one of the 6 carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. She had participated in nearly every major carrier battle of the Pacific War: Coral Sea, Eastern Solomons, Santa Cruz. She was Japan's most experienced carrier, with a veteran crew and a combat record that made her a priority target. Sinking Shokaku would be the achievement of the war for any submarine captain. Enright calculated Shokaku's projected course. The carrier would pass through Dace's patrol area within 12 hours. Enright positioned his submarine along the most likely track. He waited at periscope depth, scanning the horizon every 5 minutes. Dawn came. No carrier. Enright remained at periscope depth. The carrier could be delayed, could have changed course, could pass at any time. At 08:30 hours, lookouts spotted a large warship on the horizon. Range 12,000 yards, silhouette matched Shokaku. This was the target. Enright began his approach. Standard doctrine for attacking a carrier was to get ahead of the target, submerge, wait for the carrier to close range, then fire a spread of torpedoes. Enright followed doctrine precisely. He surfaced briefly to gain speed, moved ahead of Shokaku's projected course, submerged, and waited. But the carrier did not appear where Enright expected. Shokaku had zigzagged, changing course 30 degrees to port. The carrier was now on a track that would pass 3,000 yards to the east of Dace's position. Too far for an effective torpedo shot. Enright had 2 choices: surface, reposition, try again, or stay submerged, fire long-range torpedoes with low probability of hitting. Enright chose to surface and reposition. He brought Dace to the surface and ran at flank speed to regain attack position, but daylight was approaching. Carrier lookouts would spot a surfaced submarine. Enright had minutes, not hours. At 09:40 hours, Enright was still not in attack position. The sun was rising, visibility increasing. Shokaku's destroyer escort would detect Dase if she remained on the surface. Enright made his decision. He ordered Dase to dive. The attack was aborted. Shokaku steamed past, untouched, unaware that an American submarine had been tracking her for 3 hours. Enright remained submerged until dark. He surfaced and searched for Shokaku. The carrier was gone, disappeared into the vast Pacific. Enright radioed his patrol report to headquarters. Shokaku contact made. Attack aborted due to unfavorable geometry and approaching daylight. No damage inflicted. The response from headquarters was professional but cold. Acknowledged. Continue patrol. Dace spent the next 3 weeks searching for targets in her assigned area. She found a tanker on November 23rd. Enright maneuvered into attack position and prepared to fire. Japanese escort ships appeared and forced Dace deep with depth charge attack. The tanker escaped. No damage inflicted. The patrol ended on December 11th when Dace returned to Midway. 49 days at sea. 0 confirmed sinkings. 1 damaged freighter. 1 missed opportunity against the most important carrier target in the Pacific theater. Enright knew what was coming. The patrol report would be reviewed by Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarine Force Pacific. Lockwood was known for giving his submarine captains significant freedom to make tactical decisions. He was also known for relieving commanders who failed to sink ships. Enright did not wait for Lockwood's judgment. On December 12th, Enright submitted a formal request. I was responsible for an unproductive patrol and request to be relieved by an officer who can perform more satisfactorily. The request reached Lockwood's desk on December 14th. Lockwood granted it immediately. Enright was relieved of command of Dace. He was assigned to administrative duties at the Midway submarine base. Dace received a new commanding officer. Under the new commander, Dace went on to sink multiple Japanese ships and earned a Presidential Unit citation. The submarine was successful. Enright had been the problem. Or so it seemed to everyone at Midway. Enright spent 6 months processing patrol reports, coordinating logistics, assigning repair schedules, desk work, paperwork, the kind of duty that ended submarine careers. Officers who failed in command rarely received second chances. The submarine force had more qualified commanders than available submarines. Failed commanders were transferred to surface ships or shore duty. Their submarine days were finished, but Enright refused to accept this outcome. In June of 1944, he requested a meeting with Admiral Lockwood. The meeting lasted 15 minutes. Enright argued that his failure on Dace had been due to excessive caution, following doctrine too rigidly, not trusting his instincts. He had learned from the failure. He requested another submarine command. Lockwood listened. He reviewed Enright's record. Naval Academy class of 1933, upper third of his class. 3 years service on battleship Maryland. Submarine qualification in 1936. 8 years submarine experience before the war. Commands of USS O-10 and USS Dace. 0 sinkings but 0 major errors except the Shokaku incident. Lockwood made his decision. Enright would get his second chance, but not immediately. Enright remained at Midway until September. Finally, in late August, Lockwood summoned him. USS Archerfish needs a new commanding officer. Her 4th patrol just ended with no sinkings. The crew is experienced but frustrated. They need a commander who will be aggressive. Can you be that commander? Enright said yes. On September 1st, 1944, Commander Joseph Enright assumed command of USS Archerfish. November 28, 1944, 20:48 hours. Archerfish was running on the surface 60 miles south of Tokyo Bay. Enright had been assigned lifeguard duty, positioned to rescue downed B-29 bomber crews during raids on Tokyo. The raids had been cancelled that morning. Enright was free to hunt. The radar operator called out a contact. 2 ships, 12 miles away, bearing north. Large radar returns. Enright ordered flank speed and moved to intercept. At 2200 hours, Lookout spotted the contacts visually. 1 massive vessel with 3 destroyer escorts. The destroyers were running close formation. The large ship appeared to be a tanker. Enright studied the silhouette through binoculars. The profile was wrong for a tanker. Too much superstructure, too much height. This was a warship, possibly a battleship, possibly a carrier. Enright's executive officer estimated the target's length at over 800 feet. Whatever it was the largest Japanese warship Enright had encountered. The destroyers complicated the approach. They were running anti-submarine patterns, forcing the task group to zigzag at irregular intervals. Enright tracked the formation from 12,000 yards, watching, calculating speed and heading. The Japanese ships were making 20 knots. Archerfish could make 20 knots on the surface, but barely. Enright could not overtake them on a straight course. He had to predict their zigzag pattern and cut the angle. The chase began in earnest at 21:30 hours. Enright ordered all 4 diesel engines to maximum output. Archerfish's engines were rated for sustained operation at 1,600 horsepower per engine. Flank speed required pushing them to 1,800 horsepower. The chief engineer warned that sustained operation at this power level risked engine damage. Enright accepted the risk. Missing this target was not an option. The engine room crew monitored temperatures, pressures, fuel consumption. The diesels roared. Black smoke poured from the exhaust ports. On the surface, in darkness, the smoke was invisible to Japanese lookouts. But the sound carried across the water. Enright kept Archerfish at least 8,000 yards behind the Japanese formation, close enough to track, far enough to avoid detection. The Japanese ships maintained their zigzag pattern. Every 12 minutes, the formation turned 30 degrees left or right. Enright timed the intervals precisely. 12 minutes between turns, 30-degree angle. The pattern was consistent, predictable. Enright used this information to calculate his intercept course. If the Japanese maintained this pattern, they would zigzag within 5,000 yards of Archerfish's position at approximately 02:30 hours. That would put Enright ahead of the formation, in position to submerge and execute a classic ambush attack. But only if the Japanese maintained their pattern. Any deviation would ruin the geometry. At 22:30 hours, Enright was 10,000 yards behind the Japanese formation. The gap was closing slowly. Archerfish was making 20.3 knots. The Japanese formation was making 20.0 knots. A 3/10 knot advantage. At this rate, Enright would be in position in 3 hours. At 2300 hours, the Japanese formation turned back toward the northwest. This turn brought them closer to Archerfish. The range decreased to 7,000 yards. Enright's sonar operator detected propeller sounds. The Japanese ships were close enough that acoustic detection was possible. Enright ordered his crew to remain quiet. No unnecessary movement, no loud conversation. Sound carried through water far better than through air. A careless noise could alert Japanese sonar operators. At 23:30 hours, Enright recalculated his intercept solution. The Japanese zigzag pattern had changed slightly. The turns were still every 12 minutes, but the angle had decreased to 25 degrees. This smaller angle meant the formation was covering more distance in each leg of the zigzag. Enright adjusted his course to compensate. At midnight, Enright was 6,000 yards behind the formation, still closing, but slowly. The chief engineer reported engine temperatures were approaching maximum safe limits. Enright ordered a brief reduction to 1,700 horsepower to allow the engines to cool. Archerfish's speed dropped to 19.5 knots. The Japanese formation maintained 20 knots. The gap began to widen. Enright watched the radar screen. 7,000 yards. 8,000 yards. He was losing ground. At 00:30 hours, Enright ordered power back to 1,800 horsepower. The engines responded. Archerfish accelerated back to 20.3 knots. The gap stabilized at 8,000 yards, then began to close again. 7,500 yards. 7,000 yards. At 0100 hours, the Japanese formation executed another turn. This time, they turned southwest, directly away from Archerfish. The geometry worsened. Enright was now chasing them from directly astern. This was the worst possible position for an intercept. The Japanese ships could maintain this course indefinitely, and Archerfish would never close the distance. Enright considered his options. He could break off and search for other targets. He could radio headquarters and request support from other submarines in the area. He could continue the chase and hope for another zigzag that would improve the geometry. Enright decided to continue. This target was too valuable to abandon. If this was a carrier, and Enright believed it was, sinking it would justify every risk. At 0130 hours, the Japanese formation maintained their southwest course. Enright paralleled them at 8,000 yards. His fuel state was becoming a concern. Running at flank speed consumed fuel at 3 times the normal rate. Archerfish had enough fuel for another 6 hours at this speed, then she would need to reduce power to conserve reserves for the return voyage to base. 6 hours. Enright checked his watch. It was 0135 hours. By 0730 hours, he would have to break off the chase or risk running out of fuel before reaching friendly waters. At 0200 hours, the Japanese formation zigzagged again. They turned northwest, back toward their original course. The geometry improved instantly. Enright was now 7,000 yards behind and slightly to port of the formation. If they maintained this course for another 30 minutes, Enright would be ahead of them. At 0230 hours, Enright recalculated his position. He was 6,000 yards behind the formation, but more importantly, he was ahead of their baseline course. If the Japanese zigzagged southwest again, they would pass within 5,000 yards of Archerfish. Time to prepare for submerged attack, Enright briefed his officers. When the Japanese turn southwest, we submerge. We position ourselves across their track. We wait for them to close range. We fire all 6 bow tubes, 1 spread, all torpedoes. This target is too big to waste shots on multiple attacks. We fire everything, dive deep, evade. Understood. The officers understood. This was the moment Enright had been training for since he took command of Archerfish 2 months earlier. At 0256 hours, the Japanese formation turned southwest. The geometry was perfect. Enright ordered dive. Archerfish slipped beneath the surface smoothly, quietly. Ballast tanks flooded. The submarine descended to periscope depth. 60 feet below the surface, Enright raised the periscope and scanned the area. The Japanese formation was 7,000 yards away, closing at 20 knots. Time to contact, approximately 17 minutes. Enright lowered the periscope. No point keeping it raised. Periscope wakes could be spotted by alert lookouts. Better to stay hidden until the last possible moment. The crew rigged for silent running. All unnecessary equipment shut down. Ventilation fans off. Machinery that made noise was isolated. The only sounds were the quiet hum of electric motors and the breathing of 81 men. At 0300 hours, Enright raised the periscope for a quick look. The Japanese formation was 5,000 yards away. The massive ship was clearly visible now. Flight deck. Island superstructure. Carrier. Definitely a carrier. Enright could see aircraft on the deck. Or what appeared to be aircraft. Actually, these were Oka rocket bombs, but Enright had no way to identify them at this distance. He made quick sketches, noting every detail. Length, beam, superstructure configuration. These details would be crucial for intelligence analysis after the patrol. Enright lowered the periscope. The Japanese ships turned southwest at 22:30 hours. Enright ordered course change to intercept. The task group turned back northwest at 2300 hours. Enright adjusted again. This was not blind luck. This was mathematics. Speed, bearing, interval between turns. Enright tracked the pattern for 3 hours. At 0130 hours, he had calculated the zigzag intervals. The Japanese commander was turning every 12 minutes, alternating 30 degrees left and right from base course. Predictable. Fatal. At 0200 hours, Enright was 8,000 yards behind the Japanese formation. Still too far for a submerged attack. He needed to get ahead of them, to position Archerfish across their path so he could submerge and fire from ambush. Surfaced attacks against destroyer escorts were suicide. Enright kept Archerfish on the surface, running at flank speed, engines straining, diesel smoke trailing into the darkness. The Japanese lookouts never saw him. They were watching for submarines ahead of their formation, not behind. Enright was pursuing them from astern, a tactic submariners called an end around. If the Japanese maintained course, Enright would never catch them. But if they zigged at the wrong moment, they would turn directly into his path. At 0256 hours, the Japanese formation turned southwest, straight toward Archerfish. Enright had cut the angle. He was now 5,000 yards ahead of the task group. Time to submerge. Enright ordered dive, and Archerfish slipped beneath the surface. Silent running, all non-essential equipment shut down. The Japanese destroyers had sonar. One active ping would reveal Archerfish's position. The crew moved through the submarine on rubber-soled shoes. Every man knew his job. Every action was deliberate, quiet, precise. Enright raised the periscope and studied the approaching warship through the eyepiece. The target was huge, far larger than any carrier he had seen in recognition manuals. Flight deck, island superstructure, massive hull. This was definitely an aircraft carrier. Unknown class, unknown identity. Enright made sketches on a notepad. He would need these for the patrol report. Naval intelligence would want details. At 0304 hours, Enright realized the carrier was going to pass north of Archerfish. Wrong position. He needed the carrier to expose her broadside. A bow or stern shot against a target this large would require perfect angle and perfect luck. Enright did not believe in luck. He believed in geometry. At 03:12 hours, the carrier turned south. Course change, 30 degrees. The zigzag pattern continued, but this turn put the carrier on a collision course with Archerfish. The geometry was perfect. Enright ordered final approach. Archerfish crept forward at 2 knots. Range closed to 2,000 yards, 1,500 yards, 1,200 yards. The destroyers were spread in a screen 300 yards ahead of the carrier. If Archerfish got any closer, the destroyers would detect her. Enright had to fire now. 1,400 yards. Enright marked his firing solution, all 6 forward torpedo tubes ready. He set the torpedoes to run at 10 feet depth. Shallow. The carrier's draft would be at least 30 feet. Standard doctrine was to aim torpedoes at 15 to 20 feet depth to explode beneath the waterline. Enright ignored doctrine. A carrier this large would have anti-torpedo bulges below the waterline, armored compartments designed to absorb explosions. Enright wanted his torpedoes to hit higher, above the bulges, where the hull plating was thinner. If the torpedoes ran deeper than set, they would still hit below the waterline. If they ran true, they would punch holes in the carrier's side 10 feet below the surface. Either way, she would flood. Enright called out firing sequence. Tube 1, fire. 8-second interval. Tube 2, fire. 8 seconds. Tube 3, fire. 8 seconds. Tube 4, 5, 6, fire, fire, fire. 6 torpedoes running hot, straight and normal. Enright kept his eye pressed to the periscope. He watched the first torpedo track close the distance. 45 seconds to impact. The torpedo ran true. No deviation, no porpoising. It struck the carrier's starboard side amidships at 03:17 hours. A massive fireball erupted from the point of impact. The explosion sound travelled through the water, a deep, booming crack that reverberated through Archerfish's hull. Enright saw the second torpedo hit 8 seconds later. Another fireball, another explosion. The crew cheered. Enright kept watching. Torpedo 3 hit near the stern. Torpedo 4 hit forward of amidships. 4 hits confirmed. Torpedoes 5 and 6 ran under the carrier, or missed wide. Enright did not see them detonate. He had no time to confirm. The destroyers were turning toward Archerfish. They had pinpointed the torpedo wakes, calculated the launch point. Depth charges were coming. Enright ordered dive to 400 feet. Archerfish dropped like a stone, venting ballast, flooding tanks, descending fast. 400 feet was close to crush depth for a Balao-class submarine. Archerfish was rated for test depth of 312 feet, operational maximum 400 feet. Below that, the pressure hull would fail. Enright was gambling that the Japanese depth charges were set for shallower detonation. If you want to see what happened after Enright's torpedoes struck the largest warship in the world, please hit that like button. It helps us share more stories about the men who fought beneath the waves, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Enright. Archerfish reached 400 feet at 03:23 hours. The crew rigged for silent running. No talking, no movement, no machinery except essential systems. They waited in darkness, listening. The first depth charge detonated at 03:26 hours. The explosion was distant, at least 500 yards away. The destroyers were attacking where Archerfish should have been, not where she was. 13 more depth charges followed over the next 12 minutes. None came close. The Japanese destroyers were guessing, dropping charges in a pattern that covered the area where the torpedo tracks originated. But Archerfish had moved 400 yards south and gone deep. The geometry saved them again. At 03:47 hours, the depth charge attack stopped. The destroyers had lost contact. Enright kept Archerfish at 400 feet for another hour. He listened through the hydrophones, monitoring the sounds of the surface battle. The carrier's engines had stopped. He could hear breaking up noises, loud metallic groaning and cracking, bulkheads collapsing, compartments flooding. The carrier was dying. The breaking up noises continued for 47 minutes. Enright's sonar operator timed them precisely. 47 minutes of destruction sounds, then silence. Enright assumed the carrier had sunk. He recorded the time as 04:34 hours. He was wrong. The carrier was still afloat, but Enright had no way to know this. Submarines running at 400 feet cannot see surface vessels. Enright had to rely on sound, and the sounds told him the carrier was finished. At 0500 hours, Enright brought Archerfish to periscope depth. Cautiously, the destroyers might still be hunting. He raised the scope for 3 seconds. Quick look. 360-degree sweep. No contacts, no destroyers, no carrier, no wreckage. Empty ocean. Enright lowered the scope and descended back to 200 feet. He set course south, away from Tokyo Bay. Archerfish had survived. Whether the carrier had sunk or remained afloat, Enright would not know until the patrol report was filed and naval intelligence assessed the attack. He estimated his target as a Hayataka-class carrier, approximately 28,000 tons. He was wrong. The carrier displaced 72,000 tons, and at 0500 hours when Enright checked his periscope, she was still steaming south at 18 knots with 4 torpedoes holes flooding her hull. The Japanese called her Shinano. The name meant the longest river in Japan, a designation reserved for capital ships of strategic importance. Shinano had been laid down as a battleship, third of the Yamato class. Construction began in May of 1940 at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. The Yamato-class battleships were the most powerful warships afloat. 18-inch main guns, 72,000-ton displacement, armor thick enough to withstand any naval gun in the world. Japan planned to build 5 Yamato-class battleships. Only 2 were completed as battleships, Yamato and Musashi. The third hull, designated hull number 110, sat incomplete at Yokosuka when the Battle of Midway ended on June 7, 1942. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers at Midway: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, all sunk in one day. The Imperial Japanese Navy faced a carrier shortage it could not quickly replace. Construction of fleet carriers took 3 years minimum. Japan did not have 3 years. The Americans were building carriers faster than Japan could sink them. Naval architects proposed converting hull 110 from battleship to aircraft carrier. The conversion would take 2 years, but it was faster than building a new carrier from the keel up. The proposal was approved in June of 1942. Shinano's battleship hull was partially complete, with armor belt installed and lower decks framed. The conversion required removing the battleship's superstructure and replacing it with a flight deck and hangar bays. The armor belt remained. The hull structure remained. Shinano would be a carrier built on a battleship's foundation, combining the striking power of a carrier with the survivability of a battleship. At least, that was the theory. Construction continued through 1943 and into 1944. The work was conducted in absolute secrecy. American reconnaissance flights over Tokyo Bay photographed the Yokosuka yard regularly, but Shinano's construction slip was covered with camouflage netting. American naval intelligence knew Japan was building something large at Yokosuka, but they did not know what. On November 1, 1944, a B-29 bomber on reconnaissance photographed Shinano during sea trials. The photographs showed a carrier, but American analysts could not identify the class. The silhouette matched no known Japanese carrier. Naval intelligence added the ship to their list of unidentified targets, but they had no idea of its size or capabilities. Shinano was commissioned on November 19, 1944, Captain Toshio Abe commanding. The ceremony was brief. The ship was not ready for combat operations. Watertight doors were not installed. Pumps were missing in critical compartments. The crew was inexperienced. Most had never served on a carrier. Abe requested 2 more months to complete fitting out and train his crew. He was denied. American B-29 bombers were striking Tokyo with increasing frequency. Shinano was vulnerable at Yokosuka. The carrier needed to be moved to Kure Naval Base in the Inland Sea, where she could complete fitting out under better protection. The voyage from Yokosuka to Kure was 300 miles, approximately 17 hours at cruising speed. Abe wanted to wait for better weather and a larger destroyer escort. He was ordered to depart immediately with whatever escort was available. 3 destroyers were assigned: Isokaze, Yukikaze, Hamakaze, good ships, experienced crews. Not enough. A carrier the size of Shinano required at least 6 destroyer escorts for adequate protection.